Well, we know disruption is great learning, but what if learning faces a great disruption? The answer is in front of us. We're talking about EdTech. By bringing the world of chalk and board to our smartphones, the sector has seen an explosion since the onset of the pandemic. Given the benefits of convenience and access to world-class educators, learners today need no pitch to enroll. In fact, India's EdTech space has seen a whopping $4 billion come in as investment since the start of the pandemic. As India's EdTech sector goes mainstream, global e-learning platform Coursera is now doubling down on its strategy. Its second largest market in the world, India has seen Coursera grow by 24.6 million enrollments from the 1st of January 2020 to June 30th of 2021. That is the highest worldwide since Jan 2020. The country is also topped in new learner growth globally. Coursera is now making India its Asia-Pacific hub, and it's launched a series of new partnerships with enterprises and universities, along with a pricing strategy that works for the price-sensitive Indian consumer. For Coursera, that envisions a world where anyone, anywhere has the power to transform their lives through learning. The last year has been historic. The Public Benefit Corporation was certified B Corp, a private certification for profit companies that assess them on social and environmental performance. That was in February of this year. Coursera went public in March on the back of a COVID year that saw a 65% increase in users and record partnerships with universities and enterprises. Its coronavirus response initiative has helped 4,000 colleges and universities worldwide on their digital transformation journey, and its workforce recovery initiative has supported governments in 100 countries and seen 1 million citizens enroll in 8.3 million courses. Hello and welcome to this very special edition of Young Turks, India's longest-running show on startups and entrepreneurship. I'm Shereen Bhan, and to talk about the future of online learning and Coursera's plans for India, joining me now is Jeff Maggioncalda, the CEO of Coursera. Jeff, always a pleasure. Many thanks for joining us here on Young Turks. Before I talk to you about the kind of explosion that we've seen for EdTech globally and specifically for your plans in India, Jeff, I want to understand from you how you were able to anticipate what the world was going to face with the onset of the pandemic before, global leaders, policymakers, the WHO even anticipated what would happen. Take me through how your feedback loop helped you anticipate the kind of disruption that the world was going to face.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. And I have to be somewhat honest. It was a really good educated guess. I did not know for sure, but here's what happened. We have a global network of universities all around the world. And some of the first ones were Stanford, Michigan, Penn, and Duke, and Yale as well. We've also recently added a number of the leading universities in India, IIT Bombay, IIM Calcutta, to name a couple. Well, these universities are spread around the world. And in January of 2020, I got a call from our partner at Duke. They have a joint venture with Wuhan University, and they have a campus in Kunshan, China. And they said, our campus has just been shut down. There's a virus that has been affecting this area. And so we need to move all of our learning online within 7 days. Can we use Coursera for Campus for free for our faculty and for our students? Right. So that was January. And I said to our team, I said, keep your eye on this thing. This might really expand. And a lot of people, I think, in the States have been thinking that it was going to be a little bit more regionally specific like SARS was. Well, when the Prime Minister of Japan shut down all schools in the country, I sent an email to our team. This was in late February. I said, this thing might become a pandemic. And if it does, I believe that all schools will need to close and probably all offices will need to close. So we started getting ready to offer free Coursera for Campus to every campus in the world, even before that happened. And then when that ended up happening, and UNESCO said 1.6 billion students in April of 2020 had their schools closed, we were ready.
Well, that's an amazing story, and it tells you the importance of being able to listen to the information that's coming at you and then taking action on account of that. And Jeff, I know that you've always believed in the philosophy of learn, change and grow, and we've seen such a steep learning curve, not just for Coursera but for what the world has been through in the last 18 months, the changes that we've had to deal with, and of course the growth and the opportunities that have come our way as well. Sum up for me the changes that you've been able to witness, the growth that you've seen, and the learnings in the last 18 months.
You know, my friend often says that luck is the residue of design. So a lot of what it means to be ready is to make educated bets about what might happen and put yourself, your company, your team in a position to benefit if that does happen. Change creates opportunities for some and threats for others. If you can spot the change and you can figure out in what way does that change represent opportunity to your company or threats to your company, and then move to seize and take advantage of the opportunities and to mitigate the threats, you cannot ever guarantee your success, but you can maximize the chance that you're going to capitalize on the opportunities and you're going to be able to mitigate those threats. And like you said earlier, it's about feedback loops. It's about finding ways to listen, to understand the nature of the change and how you might be able to benefit from it.
Well, nicely put. Luck is the residue of design, and I agree with you there. But let's talk about business now, Jeff. And what we have seen for Coursera is what we've seen for edtech companies here in India and others globally as well. If I take a look at the numbers that you announced on the 3rd of August, total revenues at 102.1 million, up 38%. You've seen growth across various segments that you operate in. How much of this do you believe is here to stay? How much of this is going to be sticky, is going to be a structural shift as we now start to see schools, colleges and workplaces reopen?
Well, I think even before the pandemic, we had been growing nicely. The founders founded Coursera. There were two Stanford professors who said education needs to be more available to more people. One of the reasons this has become more important now than it was in the past is that the world is changing faster than it ever has before. Technology and globalization, and then accelerated by the pandemic, is creating a rate of change that means every company needs to rethink how they do business. Every person needs to rethink not only how they do their job, but the skills they need to do their job. So I believe that lifelong learning is not just something that's nice to do. It is something that you'll need to do in order to stay relevant in the workplace. And college education, it's still a very important source of education, but most people are going to need more learning for more of their lives than we ever have in the past. So I think this is going to be persistent, and this grand experiment that caused every teacher to teach online and every learner to learn online, I think people have really realized the efficiency, the affordability, the flexibility, and the relevancy of what you can learn online sometimes exceeds more traditional forms of learning.
So what is this new hybrid model going to look like as far as Coursera is concerned, Jeff, as we move forward? You're absolutely right. We are going to have to see skills being upgraded and skills that are relevant to the jobs market of the future, and digital capabilities will have to play a key role there. But in the context of hybrid learning, how do you see this evolving?
Well, I think it's tricky. We don't know exactly how hybrid learning is going to turn out. And I like to use an analogy to say, how will remote work play out? At Coursera, in March of 2020, we embraced a work from anywhere policy. We said we will never require employees to come back to work. Now, we will still have offices, and we will open those offices. And if you want to come to an office, you can, but we will not force people to come back to an office. We don't know exactly what the future of work looks like, but I think it's going to be a lot more remote and a lot more flexible, and companies will be tapping into a global talent pool that's less place-based. I think learning will be much the same. I think professors will want to gain access to the most cutting-edge type of curriculum. That's what students are going to want, because that's what employers are going to want. And the other thing, too, is there's about 2.3 billion people who are working age in the world who never attended college. Yeah. All these working people cannot quit their jobs and go back to college. They will have to access learning online. And so we think that the stock of people who will need to learn in order to do well in their careers is not just young people going to college, it's everybody in the workforce who will have to reinvent their skill set to stay current. And we think online learning is going to be the fundamental mechanism that most people get in order to refresh their skills. You
know, Jeff, you're right about the fact that we don't yet know how this is all going to play out. And I'm always hesitant to sort of, write premature obituaries of this is the way that work, the way that we work is over for now and there's going to be new style of functioning, etc. Because you were not a convert or a believer in the remote work model, and you've become much more of a believer today because of what we've experienced over the last 18 months. So how much of a factor is this going to be, especially when we talk about the war for talent? I've just come back from the Valley shooting a special series there, and talent is perhaps top of mind as far as every CEO is concerned. So how crucial is this new style of work, remote work, flexible work, going to be, especially in the context of a talent war?
So you're right on it. I was a complete skeptic. At 18 years at my last, I've been a CEO for 25 years. 18 years, I believed you got to be in the office, you got to see face to face. That's how you collaborate. That's how you get things done. Well, guess what? A pandemic comes along and you got no more choices. So you move online. Now, I did say to my head of HR before we closed down the office in March of 2020, I said, we cannot require our employees to come back. And here's why. Because some other companies, I'm sure, will let them work remotely. Whether that's Facebook or Twitter or Google or Microsoft or whomever. Someone's going to do that. And when they do that, our best people will say, either you let me have that flexibility or I'll quit and go work for somebody else. I knew it was going to be a basis of competition for talent. Now, CEOs can go and they can say, we're going to force people to come back and that's the way it's going to be. I will tell them, I will hire every one of your best people. If they don't want to come back to your office, they can come to work for Coursera and they don't have to come to an office. So the war for talent means that talented people call the shots. And if they want flexibility, employers are going to have to figure out how to make that work. We're doing it, and I suspect every leading employer is going to embrace a much broader work remote policy because that's what the most talented people are looking for. And if they don't do it, they will lose the most talented employees.
But Jeff, I want to talk to you about, what we are seeing as far as the labor market, the job market is concerned, and what that means in terms of the kinds of courses, the kinds of capabilities, the kinds of skills that will be required. AI, machine learning, data science, I would imagine that those are amongst the top courses that people opt for when they come to Coursera. But how do you see this playing itself out?
Well, I think what you said earlier is totally true. Right now, the skills that are urgent and important, in other words, I need them now and I will need them for the next decades, those are those most technical skills in least supply and in highest demand. Data science, machine learning, AI, computer science, software programmers, cybersecurity, that's going to be something that a lot of companies focus on either hiring or building themselves. But there's something more fundamental that you touched on earlier when you talked about learn, change, and grow. I think in order to be an effective employee, you're living in, whether it's this employer or that employer, you're living in a workplace that will be more dynamic than anything we've ever seen. And your job as an employee is going to be partly to keep up, to figure out how to refresh your own skills, work in different environments with different people doing different things. And so I think that this dedication to learning is really a pronounced thing. So it's not just the technical skills. A lot of employers are also asking us to say, how do you teach resilience? How do you teach creativity, design thinking, agile thinking? How do you teach people how to work remotely, manage remotely? I mean, there's just so much change, and that change demands skills to understand how to adapt to that change.
Yes, I saw one of the top courses being sought on Coursera is the art of well-being as well, and I know that a lot of us have had to deal with that. But Jeff, let me address the issue of India. Of course, it is a strategic market for you, important market for you. It is your second largest market. What are you seeing different in India today, in your experience, and how are you gearing up to cater to the needs of this market going forward?
Well, yeah, so what we're seeing is in 2020, we went from 47 million registered learners and grew by another 30 million in 12 months. So we saw an enormous growth, of course, fueled heavily by the pandemic. But a lot of that growth was in India. So the number of new registered learners in India, 7.5 million new learners came to Coursera from India. the top country in the world. The second country was the US, with 7 million new learners. But India had more new registered learners on Coursera than any other country in the world. And then in terms of course enrollments, India has, as you mentioned, had 24.6 million course enrollments from learners in India. The second was the US at 13 million. When you have a country of over 1 billion people who are upwardly mobile, who are really culturally put a lot of focus on education, you see a lot of power and a lot of momentum. Some people call it the demographic dividend. The ability of these young people, if they can get access to education, to turn India into an economic powerhouse. So we, like many other companies, are realizing there's just so much potential, so much opportunity. And in a post-pandemic world where not only can all these folks learn from anywhere because of online learning, increasingly they can work from anywhere. So global job opportunities will be available to this billion-plus population in India. And I think it's just terrific. And I think that the government is one of the most leading and visionary governments of any that I've seen in the world in terms of setting out an educational policy that says we're going to take what's called the gross enrollment ratio. It's the percentage of people starting college from 29% to 35% by 2025 and to 50% by 2035. Online education is the only way to do that, to hit those numbers. And the government is leaning hard into that kind of an innovative educational delivery system.
One of the interesting things that I was noticing when I looked at your numbers is the gender composition. And we have seen that in India specifically, there is a rise in STEM course enrollments among women learners, up from 22% pre-pandemic to the second highest increase globally. And globally, that number stands at 37% today. And that is good news as far as I'm concerned. But are you doing anything in specific, Jeff, at Coursera to try and bridge the gender gap, to try and ensure that we see more women actively participate in jobs of the future?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that it's a combination of a few things. Number one is having the skills to do the jobs, so making sure there's equal access to education. And as you said, we've seen a great bridging of the gender gap in terms of overall course enrollments globally. We saw the percentage of women taking courses on Coursera grew from 38% before the pandemic to 45% in 2021, almost 50-50 now, so we're getting close. And then in STEM courses, as you mentioned, we saw in India STEM course enrollments growing from 23% to 32%. So India bridged that gender gap faster than every other country other than one. So it was the number 2 highest increase globally in bridging that gender gap in STEM skills. So I think skilling is one major piece. But I believe too, I just see these twin forces of online learning and remote work, and they're working together. So many women end up bearing the responsibility for taking care of their families, whether that's children and or parents. What that usually means is, whether it's because you're having kids or raising kids or taking care of parents, job flexibility is important. Yeah. In a world with remote work, in a world of online learning, it will be easier when it's not place-based to learn and it's not place-based to work. It will be easier and more flexible for anyone, but including women, to get access to education and career opportunities. I believe that we are at the beginning of a major bridging of the gender gap, not only in terms of skills, but also in terms of career. And I believe that technology is one of perhaps the primary mechanism for bridging that gap.
Well, that's good to hear, Jeff. One of the other issues that I want to talk to you about, and this is going to be of interest here to a lot of startup founders in India, we are at an inflection point where many companies are now looking at listing and are taking the IPO route. Of course, you IPO'd in March this year. What should startup founders keep in mind? When do you believe is the right time to go to the market, and what should that playbook look like?
So I'm going to be really basic. I would love to say it depends on your vision and your passion. Here's what it depends on. You can't go public until public investors want to buy your stock. Here's what they want to buy. Revenue that's growing quickly and predictably. So you have to be a big enough country and growing rapidly. If you're growing above 20%, you're probably in pretty good shape. Above 30%, that's my magic number. Want to grow revenues faster than 30%. So revenue growth is number one. Number two is called operating leverage, which is showing your unit economics that as you get bigger, you could become more profitable. That's number two. Number three is sustainable advantage. If you create all these revenues and if you have this great operating leverage, competitors are going to come and try to beat you. You have to be able to explain why you can serve customers better than your competitors. And then the fourth one, I'll just call it organizational maturity. You got to make sure you don't screw up. You got to run a good ship. You got to have good accounting. You have to good compliance. You got to make sure that you can operate as a professionally managed company. But when you hit those four things, if you want to list, I think a lot of public investors will likely want to buy your stock.
So then in the context of the fact that you are today a listed entity, you're also a public benefit corporation, how does that align itself then to the interests of shareholders, to the interests of investors, as well as to the interests that the founders have of being able to universalize access to education?
Yeah, well, see, we're very fortunate. First of all, the company started with two founders, Andrew Ng and Daphne Kohler, two professors. They said, our job is to make world-class education available to everybody, period. They weren't in it for the money. They wanted to actually make education available. We called Coursera.org is our website. Even though we're a for-profit, we grew. And we have a few real advantages. Number one, our core mission is education. That's a public benefit. And so we feel very good about embracing our role as educators to the world. I'll also be honest. We don't ship expensive products. We don't have inventory. We don't have work in process. Our marginal costs are very, very low. We're a platform and we provide a digital good. That means that we can be, and with our partners, our university partners and industry partners, we can be very generous in helping populations that otherwise could not afford the services because our marginal costs are so low. So we looked at this and said, our mission is to help people. We have a service that can be delivered at very low cost and very high value to populations that can't afford it. We also believe that in terms of attracting partners, university partners, attracting employees, attracting even learners, doing good for the world is important for so many people, including customers. I would say it's good business strategy to do good things for the world. So we proudly declared ourselves a B Corp. We recharted in Delaware, and we believe it's entirely consistent to serve shareholder needs and to serve society's needs at the same time, because education, is such an incredible opportunity as a business, but it's also an incredible opportunity to serve the world.
Since we're talking about education and the opportunity and the headroom for growth, I want to ask you what you make of what we're seeing here in India with companies like Baiju. I mean, they've been on a buying spree and they've attracted a fair amount of investor interest. What do you make of that story?
Well, I think a lot of what it's about is any good business is in business to serve a need, to find customers who have a need and you serve that need. If it's a really big market, there's a lot of need. And if it's a dynamic market, those needs are changing rapidly. How do you possibly solve as much of the market's problems as you can? Well, you scale quickly. Part of it is by building things yourself. Part of it might be buying others. I do think that there are scale advantages in this industry. Coursera is clearly playing into it. Baiju's is clearly playing into it. And there are things you can build and things that you can partner and then things that you buy to go even faster. I suspect that the future in EdTech will include a lot of M&A because I do think a lot of this will be a scale play, and the value of moving quickly to market through acquisition will sometimes be higher than the value of building it yourself. So I think it's a smart strategy, and I think so far I'm impressed by what I'm seeing from Baiju's.
But how important is that going to be, an M&A strategy for future growth? Is that going to be part of how you look at things going forward?
It is. I mean, we clearly will be looking at that. We have over $800 million cash on our balance sheet. We have now a publicly traded currency, which makes it a little bit easier to buy companies. But I'll even go further. I'm on the board of Silicon Valley Bank out here, and so we bank almost all the innovation companies in the U.S. And what we're seeing is that the value to innovation, which is the ability to move quickly to seize a new opportunity, has never been higher. And the way that people are innovating largely is coming from capital, from venture capitalists and PE firms. They're creating new companies. Those new companies are opening up new opportunities in innovation. And to some degree, those new companies, through acquisition, are becoming an R&D capability of bigger companies. So I think as the world moves faster, the value of M&A will be higher because company formation and innovation can often happen faster outside of a company's walls than inside. I don't expect that will be true for Coursera. My job is to make sure that we innovate inside the company. But I think not just in EdTech, but across all industries, innovation will speed up. I think M&A will be an important strategy for almost every company in the long term.
Jeff, it's been an absolute pleasure. Appreciate you joining us here on Young Turks with your take on where things currently stand for the EdTech business and the opportunities for growth. We wish you and your team the very best of luck.